Greetings, kings and queens. Happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome back to the Always a Queen, the Metamorphosis platform. Thank you so much for being here with me this afternoon for another live broadcast. Greetings, queens. I see you already in the room. Greetings, Queen Saran. Greetings, Queen Monique. Thank you so much for being here with me today. We are going to be tackling a really important topic today. And so I am going to give you a moment to call up a friend, invite someone to watch with you, share the live with anybody who you think needs to hear this message. Just make sure that you are not keeping this to yourself because this is an extremely important topic that we will be taking on today. Greetings, Queen Lilith. Welcome to the Always a Queen platform live broadcast. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Queen. Share this live. Share it to anyone who you think needs to hear this message today. Do not keep this message to yourself. There are so many kings and queens out there who need to hear what I'm going to share here this afternoon. Today, we are going to be talking about attachment. We're going to talk attachment styles. We're going to talk about attachment theory and what that is all about. Trying to learn what our individual attachment styles are, what characteristics make up our attachment styles, why we have the attachment styles that we have. That is also something I am going to speak to today. Like, where does the attachment style that I have come from? Why did I cultivate this type of attachment style? Like, what is it from my childhood or my past that made me develop an attachment style like this? Particularly if you learn that you have an insecure attachment style, which is what I'm going to be spending most of the time talking about. We're going to focus, obviously, on the insecure attachment styles because those are the ones that create a problem for us. Obviously, if you have a secure and stable attachment style, you're fine. You are okay. It's the insecurity and the insecure attachment styles that create problems for us, right? So that is what we're going to be focusing on today. And of course, I am not going to just talk about the problem without talking about the solution, because why would I do that? So I have decided to make this a two-part series because it's a lot to unpack in one broadcast. I think it's too much to do it all at once. So I've decided to split it into two. So this is actually part one of this attachment talk. And in part one, I am going to focus on the problem, insecure attachment styles. We're going to zoom in on the attachment styles, talk about what they look like and what causes them. And then I will come back with part two and we will talk about the solution. Okay? So today we talk the problem. In part two, we will talk the solution. When am I going to do part two? Part two of the attachment series will be on Sunday, the 27th of March, not next week, Sunday, which is the 20th. I just want to make sure I get that. out. Next week, Sunday, I will not be doing a live. Next week, Sunday, we're going to be taking a Sunday off from the live broadcast. I will be back on the 27th of March, and we will tackle part two of this series, which is going to be the solution to insecure attachment. Okay? All right. So, once again, share this live. Make sure that everybody gets in on this. This is so very, very important. Such an important conversation. Do not keep this to yourself. All right. Greetings to all of the queens who I see popping in. Everyone is popping into the room, and I love to see it. Let's get in here. Get in here, everybody. Get into it. Very important conversation. Greetings, Queen Serene and Queen Chris and Queen Janice. I see you. Chris says, pulls up chair and napkins. Oh boy. Chris, why are you like this? Chris, why are you like this, sis? Why? Why you gotta be like that? All right. Let's get into it because there's a lot to talk about here today. Let's get into it. Let's get started. Okay. Greetings, Queen Anju. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So let's talk attachment today. All right. So I am going to tackle this as if you are all complete novices and you know absolutely nothing about attachment or attachment styles. So I am going to start from scratch with this because I want to make sure that this is as clear as water today. I don't want anybody to get lost. Greetings, Queen Sweetness Philip, and greetings, Queen Shenna. Thank you so much for being here today. All right, here we go. So, what are attachment styles? What is this whole thing about attachment styles? What is that about? Attachment styles basically speaks to the way we show up in our relationships. And I am talking specifically about romantic relationships today. Of course, attachment shows up in all of our other relationships too. Attachment isn't just applicable to romantic relationships, it's applicable to every relationship. But I want to be clear that I am specifically focused on romantic relationships. That's what I am focusing my talk on. Why am I focusing on romantic relationships specifically? I will tell you. Because it is in our romantic relationships that attachment styles are most conspicuous. In other words, it is in our romantic relationships that our attachment styles show up the most. It is where they create the most chaos. It is where they trip us up most easily, is in our romantic relationships. You could have an insecure attachment style and pretty much get away with it in your other relationships. But in your romantic relationship, it is virtually impossible to hide it. If you have an insecure attachment style, I can guarantee you, I would be willing to bet money that it's going to hit you in your romantic relationship if it doesn't hit you anywhere else. It always catches up with you whenever you try to get romantic. You might be able to get away with it in other relationships, can't get away with it in your romantic relationships. It's just hard to cover it up in a romantic relationship. And so that is where I am going to be focusing my energies. Okay. So, attachment style basically speaks to the way you show up in your relationship. And when I say the way you show up, I'm talking about how you navigate the relationship. Some people are extremely clingy in a relationship. Other people are extremely independent in a relationship. Some people are really good communicators. Other people like to stonewall. They don't want to share anything. They're very emotionally detached. And so these are examples of what I mean when I say how you show up in your relationship. That is what I am talking about. Okay? So, your attachment style speaks to the way you show up in relationships in general. And so you can already begin to start thinking about, okay, how do I typically show up in my romantic relationships? Am I usually a clingy person? Am I usually very closed off? Am I usually very insecure? What typifies you? What characterizes you in your romantic relationships normally? And that begins to give you an indication of what your attachment style is. Okay, so what is attachment theory? Attachment theory is essentially a theory in the field of psychology that we use to try to determine not just how people are showing up in their relationships, but we also use it to try to figure out why they show up in their relationships in a particular way, because there's reason behind every behavior. No behavior is just happening in a vacuum out here in the middle of nowhere. There's reason behind every behavior. And so, attachment theory in the field of psychology is essentially the theory that we use to figure out how you're showing up in your relationships, especially your romantic relationships. And we also use attachment theory to figure out why. The why is important, because if we're going to fix an insecure attachment style, we need to know why are you showing up that way. And so attachment theory is basically what psychologists like myself turn to try to, I guess, analyze a person's behavior if they are repeatedly showing up in their relationships in a particular way and it is wreaking havoc in their lives. Immediately we begin to look into attachment theory to see what is happening there. Because if the person is showing up in the same way in all of their relationships, they're in this relationship, it didn't work out, another relationship, it didn't work out, another relationship, and all of their relationships, they're showing up the same, but apparently not recognizing that there is a common thread. There is a pattern here that is causing all of their relationships to fail. Sometimes people cannot see this until you draw it to their attention. Sometimes people cannot see themselves the way someone else on the outside looking in can see them. And so sometimes they need to sit down with a therapist who can tell them, look, this is what you are doing in all of your relationships. Do you realize this? And sometimes they have an aha moment and they're like, wow, you're right. But then the question comes, why do I keep doing that though? Why do I keep doing that in all of my relationships? I can't figure that out. That's where attachment theory comes in. Attachment theory helps us to find the why behind the behavior. Why are you acting like that in all of your relationships and basically sabotaging all of them without realizing it? So that is attachment theory. Hello, husband. So, attachment theory basically speaks to the attachment style that you cultivate in childhood. Now, psychologists and sociologists who study attachment theory believe that most of the time, and when I say most of the time, I mean like 99% of the time, your attachment style is formed in childhood. It's formed in childhood and then it follows you into your adult life. 99% of the time. I'm going to talk about the 1% in a moment. But most of the time, your attachment style is formed in childhood and then it follows you into your adult years. And so attachment theory, for the most part, is based on the relationship that a child has with his or her caregivers. Okay. And notice I didn't say parents, I said caregivers, because your caregivers in childhood are not always your parents. Okay. Sometimes it's your parents, sometimes it's grandparents, sometimes it's aunts and uncles, sometimes it might be a foster family or an adopted family. I mean, it could be literally anybody. And so I want to make sure that I am spreading it out so that you understand that it's not just parents who influence your attachment style. Your attachment style is influenced by caregivers in general. Okay. And so it is basically based on how you attach yourself to the caregivers in your life as an infant and what type of attachment relationship develops between you and your caregivers. And then from there, your attachment style tends to follow you into your adult life. And so, what you find happening is that persons who have insecure attachment with their caregivers as children tend to go into their romantic relationships with that very same insecure attachment style, and their romantic relationships tend to mirror what their relationships with their caregivers in childhood looked like. That was a mouthful, but I hope I'm coming through clearly, right? Okay. And so essentially it's a situation where your romantic relationships then begin to reflect. They are a reflection essentially of your attachment style and your relationship with the persons who were your primary caregivers in childhood. Okay. So, for the most part, like I said, attachment styles are developed in infancy, okay, um, based on our relationships with our earliest caregivers, as I said. And researchers believe that attachment style is formed within your first year of being alive, right? This is just to give you an idea of how critical early childhood is. Like early childhood is it is a critical period of our lives. I think a lot of parents take it for granted. And so this is a message for parents too. This is a message for everybody. This is such an all encompassing, far reaching message, right? It's a message for parents. It's a message for anybody who is dating or wants to date or get married. It is for everyone essentially because researchers believe that attachment style is formed within our first year of being alive, quite literally. Between 7 to 11 months of age is what they believe is the critical period for the formation of an attachment style. Right. And why do humans form an attachment style? Well, basically, human beings are born helpless. We're born helpless. And so our brains are wired from birth to search for and to attach to a reliable caregiver for protection, obviously. And I think that this isn't just true of human beings, this is true of all living things. Even an animal does that. An animal, a newborn animal, will attach itself to a reliable caregiver who is going to protect it and feed it and nurture it and these types of things. Your brain is naturally wired to do this. And so nobody has to teach you to attach. You very naturally and organically attach to your caregivers. It's the most natural thing in the world to do. All right. And so, there are persons who have written about this natural tendency that we have to attach ourselves to our caregivers for protection and for our survival. And this has been referred to as the attachment effect because we just do it without anyone having to teach it to us. You naturally attach, right? And so the quality of that first bond the quality of the bond between you and that very first primary caretaker or caretakers is really a critical component. It's a huge predictor of what the rest of your life may very well look like. Now, I want to interject here. Greetings, Queen Ursula. I want to interject here that your attachment style is not carved in stone. Let me make that clear. Your attachment style is not carved in stone. So if, as I do this talk, you come to realize that you have an insecure attachment style and that you need to work on it, you can. There is a way to remedy it. And like I said, that is what I will tackle in part 2 of this attachment series. So today we're going to discuss the problem. In part 2, which is coming up on the 27th of March, which is not next Sunday, but the other one, we will tackle the solution. So we're talking the problem today, and part 2, we talk solutions, okay? And the fact that we're talking solutions makes it clear that this isn't carved in stone. If you realize that you have an insecure attachment style, it can be fixed. You can work on it and develop a secure attachment style. Okay, so I just wanted to interject that because I don't want anyone to walk away thinking, oh my goodness, I have an insecure attachment style. Woe is me. No, there are no woes. There are only woes if you decide not to work on it and fix it. Okay. Greetings, Queen D. Thank you for joining in this afternoon's live. Welcome. We're talking attachment. All right. So the quality of that first bond with your early caretakers, it could be very loving and stable, or it might be an inconsistent bond, or it might even be completely absent. There is no bond to even speak of, right? Because there are infants who are neglected and abandoned by their parents. That happens, unfortunately. But the nature of that bond, the quality of that bond, quite literally shapes the developing brain of that infant. Okay, and influences you throughout life in how you deal with loss, how you behave in relationships, basically how you are showing up in the world, essentially. Okay, so that early bond with those caretakers in the first year of your life, super important. Now, remember that I said earlier that 99% of the time, attachment styles are determined in childhood and then follow you into your adult life. I said 99% of the time because most of the times that is the case. But there is something very important that a lot of people overlook. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. It's not mentioned in a lot of the books that we read or the articles that are written and stuff like that. And I think it's important to mention that 1%. Because if I say 99% of the time your attachment style is formed in childhood, then the question is, then the 1%, like what does that represent? Like, if it's not formed in childhood, which is 99% of the time, then what's the other thing that could be determining my attachment style? I will tell you what it is. So, caregivers are not the only ones who can shape your attachment style. Okay, they might be the majority, but people's attachment styles may also be influenced by other significant relationships throughout their lives. So a person can have a secure attachment during childhood. Listen closely to this. A person can have had a secure attachment in their childhood. However, betrayals, infidelities, abuse of various kinds in adulthood can lead to an insecure attachment style. That can actually happen. Okay, so sometimes you may come across an adult who has an insecure attachment style that is not necessarily linked to their childhood, because in childhood they may have had excellent parenting and had a very secure attachment style, but in adulthood they had extremely severely traumatic experiences that caused them to develop insecure attachment in their adult life. But like I said, this is not the majority of the time. This is a small percentage of the time. Most of the adults that you come across who are insecurely attached, they have had this issue since childhood, most of the time. Okay? So then, what are the attachment styles? Did you explain how the different show up? Oh, no, not yet. I'm going there now. I'm going there now, D. So, what are the attachment styles? That's the next question. Obviously, that's the question of the hour. What are the attachment styles? So, there are four attachment styles in attachment theory. Okay? So, if you read up about attachment theory anywhere, you will see four attachment styles. All right? The first one is the secure attachment style. Obviously, if you have a secure attachment style, you're fine. You're okay. We don't even need to look into what you're doing, because you should be navigating your relationships just fine. So this first one is not the problem at all. The problem is the other three that come after it. Okay? The other three are historically known to be insecure attachment styles. So the only one that is A-OK is number one, which is the secure attachment style. If you have a secure attachment style, you're good. The other three, you got to watch yourself. Okay? So, what are the other three? And these are the three that I'm going to be focusing all of my attention on, because these are the problematic guys. So, the second attachment style is referred to as anxious attachment style. Sometimes you might hear it being called the anxious preoccupied attachment style. Same thing. You might see a variation of the name depending on which book you are reading, depending on which article, depending on who wrote it, etc. It's the anxious attachment style officially, but also sometimes referred to as the anxious preoccupied attachment style. That's number two. It's obviously, by as the name suggests, an insecure attachment style. Number three is the avoidant attachment style. This one is sometimes also called the avoidant dismissive attachment style. This too depends on which book you happen to be reading, or which article, or which author. Both refer to the same attachment style. Okay, so that's number three, the avoidant attachment style or avoidant dismissive. Same thing. And then number four is the fearful avoidant attachment style. Fearful avoidant. This one is also sometimes referred to as the disorganized attachment style. So if you read somewhere and somebody's talking about somebody having a disorganized attachment style, this is the one that they are referring to, the fearful avoidant attachment style. And I will tell you in a little bit, I will tell you exactly why it is referred to as disorganized by some psychologists. There's a reason why it got that nickname. Okay, so we are going to be focusing our attention on the last three: anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, fearful avoidant attachment. Okay, let me say that again. We're going to focus on the last three: anxious attachment, also known as anxious preoccupied attachment; avoidant attachment, also known as dismissive attachment; and the fearful avoidant attachment, also known as disorganized attachment. Okay? I'm making sure to repeat this in case anybody is taking notes or anything. Not that you need to take notes because all of these lives are recorded, as you know, and they're uploaded to the Always a Queen platform. So you can always go back and watch this again. You can download them, you can share them. They are there for you to access. So you can go back and watch anything that you have missed. All right. So now that we have the names down, let's get into what each attachment style looks like. I know this is what you're waiting to hear. I know. Okay. So let's get into an overview of what each one of these attachment styles look like. Now, like I said, the first one is secure attachment. This one we don't need to worry about so much. If you have secure attachment, it means that you have the ability to form secure, loving relationships with others. A securely attached person can trust others and be trusted. They love and they accept love without any difficulty. They can get close to others with relative ease. They are not closed off. They're not stonewalling. They're not afraid of intimacy. They don't feel panicked when their partners need time or space away from them. They're able to depend on others without becoming overly dependent or codependent. You know, all of these relationship issues that we see on a day to day basis, people with secure attachment don't typically have these. If they do pop up, it is rare. And if they pop up, someone who has secure attachment is usually equipped emotionally to navigate their way through the situation, find a solution, and move on. Okay, so people who have secure attachment are usually pretty good at navigating relationships and tend to have healthy, fruitful relationships. Also, people who are securely attached tend to attract other people who are securely attached. And so that also reduces the likelihood of them having relationship issues other than the usual stuff. Because no relationship is perfect. Every relationship has its ups and downs, but they are able to properly navigate those ups and downs. And they're not typically the folks who would end up, in crisis in a relationship. Okay. So we're going to focus our attention on the other three because the other three are the ones who often end up in crisis and sometimes even have to end relationships because of insecure attachment. So let's start with the anxious people. First group, the anxious attachment style, also known as the preoccupied attachment style. So, anxious attachment is a form of insecure attachment style that is marked by deep fear of abandonment. I feel like I should say that again. If you see me glancing off to the left, sometimes it's because I have my notes here and I want to make sure that I do not miss anything. This is such a critical conversation. And so I want to make sure that I get everything out. Okay. So, anxious, preoccupied attachment is a style of attachment that is marked by a deep fear of abandonment. Okay. So, anxiously attached people tend to be very insecure about their relationships. They are often worrying about their partner, whether that partner will leave them. And so, as a result of that, they are always hungry for validation, constantly seeking validation because of this deep rooted fear that they have that someone is going to leave them. And later on, I'm going to talk about how these things start in childhood, like what type of parenting would someone have received to get them to this point. We're going to talk about that too. But I'm going to give you an overview of each one of the attachment styles first. And then I'm going to back up and we're going to talk about what the childhood would have looked like to get you here. Okay. So they are usually worrying about whether or not their partner will leave them, and so they tend to show up as people who are hungry for validation in their relationships, constantly seeking validation. Anxious attachment is associated with neediness. It's associated with clingy behavior, like getting very anxious if your partner doesn't text you back fast enough, or if you call them and they don't answer the phone right away, or they don't answer the phone at all, and like that kind of behavior. And so immediately, instead of thinking that they might be busy or they might be sleeping or they might be taking a shower or any of the other things that a person could be doing that might prevent them from picking up their phone or answering a text message right away, instead of going to one of those things, someone who has anxious attachment, their mind instead is going to begin to think of all of the possible negative things. They begin to catastrophize immediately, and they can come up with 100 negative scenarios as to why this person has not responded to their text message immediately. Right? This is what anxious attachment does. For you. They're not answering me fast enough. They didn't answer when I called just now. So that must mean that they don't care about me. And you could run with that and come up with all kinds of things that you could add to that. Okay. So how do you know if an adult, a person has this anxious attachment style? People with this anxious preoccupied attachment style, um, they they can be really good partners. I think that's the best way I can put it. They can be very good partners in a relationship, very loving, very attentive. They think really highly of you and treat you like a king or a queen, but often they are suffering from extremely low self esteem, right? And so it's as if they are holding you up on a pedestal, so to speak, but they somewhere within themselves are questioning whether or not they are worthy or deserving of you. Thus, the constant fear that you could walk out and leave them at any time. And so they tend to be really adoring, really supportive, really attentive partners. They are literally worshiping the ground that you walk on, but it's not usually because they think that you are the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, maybe it is that too, but it's also the fact that they want to make sure that you don't leave them. Right. Um, and so low self esteem is usually behind a lot of the behaviors that we see coming from people with this type of attachment, with this anxious, preoccupied attachment style. Okay, so these individuals are sensitive and very attuned to their partner's needs, but they are often insecure and anxious about their own worth in the relationship, unfortunately. So if the one that they love, if the object of their affection, this partner who they are worshiping, rejects them, fails to respond to their needs, then they begin immediately to start blaming themselves. Because remember, to begin with, they don't think that they are worthy. They don't think that they are valuable. They don't think that they deserve you. And so they're not going to blame you if you are unresponsive to their needs. Instead, they blame themselves and they begin to question their own worth instead of questioning your worth. And I know that that does not make sense, but that is what a person with anxious, preoccupied attachment style does. So essentially, the partner's treating them like crap. And instead of them saying, this is a crappy partner, I should leave this person, they instead blame themselves and somehow label themselves as not being worthy of love. Unfortunate, but sad, right? So, generally, adults with anxious attachment need constant reassurance that they are loved, that they are worthy, that they are good enough. The strong fear of abandonment might cause these anxious adults to be intensely jealous also, or suspicious of their partners. I mean, obviously, if this person is living in fear of the fact that you might leave them, well, clearly they are often going to be jealous if they think that there's somebody out there who's threatening their spot. So they can be jealous, they can be very suspicious sometimes as well if the need arises. And this fear might also lead them to become desperate, clingy, just basically, as the name suggests, just basically preoccupied with their relationships. Adults who have an anxious attachment style are often afraid or even incapable of being alone. So these tend to be serial daters. You know what I call serial daters? Have you ever heard the term serial killers? And they call them serial killers because they do what? They just keep repeatedly killing one person after another, after another. Serial daters are people who are just dating one person after another, after another, after another, after another. Like they're never single. They break up with one person today, and next week they have a new relationship. They break up with this person, and the following week, it's like you cannot keep up. Sometimes you are looking on from the outside and you're like, I mean, not that it's any of our business, but sometimes you'll be seeing people changing their relationships like, wasn't she dating this person yesterday or wasn't he dating that person last week? Like, what is going on? And they turn into serial daters, not necessarily because they want to be serial daters, but because they are literally incapable of being by themselves. They don't know how to be alone. It's hard for them to be alone. And I know that there may be some people listening to me right now who can relate to this. You know what I'm talking about. It's like being single is a punishment. It's like you have been condemned to die if you are single, if there is no man or woman in your life, right? This is a characteristic of anxious attachment. Okay, so these people are seeking intimacy and closeness constantly. They are highly emotional. They are also very dependent on their partners because obviously they're afraid to lose you. So they're going to be clinging on to you and extremely dependent. Um, and so they, in their minds, have convinced themselves that the presence of this person, the presence of this partner, this object of their affection, the presence of this loved one is the remedy. Like they think that the presence of that person is the remedy to all of these emotional needs that they have unmet, right? Not realizing that these unmet emotional needs don't have anything to do with this person. This is coming from your childhood. Like you've had this for like the last 20 years, but you think that this person is going to fix it. Doesn't work. Never works that way. All right. So having an insecure attachment style, it can get tiring. It's tiring for you. And I imagine it must also be very tiring for the person who is dating you also. It's exhausting all around. Because I mean, just imagine the emotional roller coaster that must be like. It's just a constant roller coaster. It's just endless, right? And so tiring, right? So it would cause a lot of anxiety, stress, unhappiness, low life satisfaction. Like basically, you feel like your quality of life is not what it ought to be. Like you're not living your best life, and you truly are not. And so you have a right to feel that way if you find yourself in this situation. So when it comes to adults with anxious attachment styles, relationships can be both Life-saving, meaning they feel like it is their lifeline, it is what is keeping them going, but also at the same time it can also be catastrophic, if things don't work out, or if that partner is not catering to this desperate emotional need that you have, because some people are just not going to put up with that. Some people will just get fed up and walk out of your life, and so relationships can either be the best thing or the worst thing that has happened to you, depending on which end of the spectrum you find yourself, right? And so, on the one hand, the fear of being alone or being rejected, that's terrible. It's a disturbing feeling for anybody who has this attachment style, because obviously the constant doubt, the constant worry is going to be a problem. But on the other hand, the presence of this loved one that you adore, um, it feels like a remedy for you. And so you can go from feeling like absolutely nothing to like being on top of the world from one day to the next, depending on how your relationship with that person is going in the moment, right? It's like your whole life revolves around them. Not good. So, an anxious individual, very insecure about where they stand in the relationship, whether their partner loves them as much as they love the person, the slightest disappointment or the slightest sign of rejection from that partner is enough to create a catastrophe. Like, this person will raise hell, because just a little thing, it's harmful to someone who already has extremely low self-esteem. Okay, so that was a mouthful, but that is essentially what the anxious preoccupied attachment style looks like. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is also an insecure attachment style. I see D says, okay, that's off the list. Next. All right, D, you're ticking them off. Awesome. I love that. Let's see what the next insecure attachment style looks like, which is the avoidant attachment style. The avoidant attachment style, which, like I said earlier, is sometimes also known as the avoidant dismissive attachment style. Now, the avoidant attachment style is an attachment style that is marked by a fear of intimacy. Okay, so this is one way in which they differ tremendously from the anxious group. They fear intimacy. Remember, I told you the anxious group, who I just got through talking about, they're actually craving intimacy. They are hunting it down. They want it. The avoidant, dismissive group, they actually fear it. Get the difference? They fear it. So people with avoidant attachment style, they tend to have trouble getting close to others or trusting others in relationships. Okay. They typically maintain some distance from their partners. So it's not that they don't get into relationships, they do, but they are one of those types of partners that is very aloof, like they're in it, but they're not all the way in it because they don't know if they can completely trust you. That's the avoidant, dismissive group. That's the group we're talking about. All right. They have a hard time getting close to others and trusting others, even in relationships. And so when they're in their relationships, they tend to maintain some distance from their partners, or they are largely emotionally unavailable in their relationships. This is a term that I hear people throwing around a lot: emotionally unavailable. Oh, I'm always dating people who are emotionally unavailable. That means that is somebody who is not really in touch with their emotions, or they're just not open to sharing or discussing their emotions or anything along those lines. And so there is a likelihood that if you find yourself with someone like this, you might be with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. Or if you are like this, you may have an avoidant attachment style, right? So, very emotionally unavailable in their relationships. They prefer to be independent, they prefer to rely on themselves, they don't trust other people to come through for them. And so, they're all about making sure that they are self sufficient and that they are in a position to always care for themselves. So, adults with this dismissive or avoidant attachment style seem to be pretty happy about who they are and where they are. So, they don't necessarily need you. In the way the anxious preoccupied people need you. It's like the previous group needs you to validate them. This group does not need you to validate them. They tend in general to be pretty happy to just be who they are without you, right? um they can be very social and easygoing, fun to be around kind of people. Sometimes they can even show up as the life of the party, like they're the jovial one, the one who's always joking around, the one who is always ready to get on the dance floor and dance. Like they tend to be very social and easygoing people. And they also might have a lot of friends, and they might also be the type who might also have a lot of sexual partners because like I said, they're fun to be around. They social, easygoing, life of the party kind of person. You know what I mean? They're the person who always has a date on their arm, like they never bored and that kind of thing. Lots of friends. And like I said, they may also have a lot of sexual partners too. Generally speaking, these are not people who would ever you would ever hear complaining that they are lonely, because usually they're not alone or lonely. However, these avoidant adults, they tend to be independent. Their self-esteem is high. They usually have pretty good self-esteem. They don't rely on others for reassurance or for emotional support. They are typically able to provide that for themselves. Okay. It's just that they don't do very well in relationships because this self-sufficiency that they have is is it's a self-sufficiency that goes overboard, if I can put it that way. It is a level of self-sufficiency that makes it hard for them to let somebody in. If that makes sense, right? Let me pause and look at this comment section really quick. I'm hyper independent, yes, blah, blah, but didn't realize the fear of intimacy applies. I see D is really putting a lot of thought into this. I like it. Saran says, oh my God, I think I may be a recovering avoidance attachments type person. Okay, Queens, I like that. I love it. You are really thinking. You're being introspective and really taking a look at yourself. And that is exactly what these lives are meant to do, is to make you stop and examine yourself. Take a look at the person in the mirror. Go inwards and see what's happening with you inside there. I love that. Love it. All right, so let's keep going. We're still talking about the avoidant attachment style. So this group, you will find that individuals like this might be invested, very heavily invested in their professional development. They are likely to build up their confidence based on their personal successes. So they tend to be very high achievers. They're big on professional development and academia and these types of things. And they appear to be very much in control of their lives when you meet them, right? For avoidant adults, social interactions and bonds come easily. They get along well with everybody. Like I said, they can even be the life of the party. But here's the catch. Here's the catch. While they are very good with the social interactions and the bonds, these social interactions and bonds tend to be very superficial. They remain on the surface. So they are everybody's friend. But when you check it out, they're not really anybody's friend because nobody really knows them past the superficial stuff. They get along well with everyone, but these bonds are usually very, very superficial. They just stay on the surface. They just stay on the surface, but they're everyone's friend. You know any people like that? I know some people like that, right? Um, so in order for a relationship to be meaningful and fulfilling, you need to go deep. There has to be some type of emotional attachment. Like you cannot have a healthy, fulfilling, satisfying relationship with someone with all of your emotions locked into a safety deposit box and never letting them out. Like what kind of relationship will that be? That is extremely unhealthy. And so you can imagine what it is like to try to have a relationship with a person like this. It's a whole thing. I mean, because their emotions, they're like a vault. They're like a vault. They're not letting you get too far in. Like you can get just this far and no further, right? Making it extremely difficult to build healthy, satisfying, fulfilling relationships with these people, right? And so, you try to have a relationship with these people and you find that you are constantly hitting a wall when dealing with an avoidant person. These persons will let you be around them, but they will not let you in. They tend to avoid strong displays of closeness and intimacy. As soon as things get serious, the dismissive avoidant individuals are likely to close themselves off. Okay, so at this point, such people who fall into this category might, things start getting serious, things start heating up, and people who find themselves in this category, they will start looking for a reason to end that relationship. They will start finding reasons to get out when things start to get too hot and heavy. They might be highly annoyed by their partner's behaviors or their partner's habit of you know or even just your very physical appearance. Everything about you will start to annoy them because you're trying to draw them out, and they are not about that life. When things start getting emotional, they are out the door, right? So consequently, the closer you try to get to them, the more they start drifting off and distancing themselves from you. People with this attachment style, they truly believe that they don't need emotional intimacy in their lives. They think that they can just do without it. They don't feel like it is a need for them. They truly believe that they can live without it. Um, and this is typically a direct result of their upbringing. Like I said, 99% of the time, your attachment style is linked to your relationships with your primary caregivers during infancy, 99% of the time. Okay. And so typically, this is a result of their upbringing. Their caregivers probably showed them that people cannot be relied on, or probably taught them that people are not to be relied on, people are not to be trusted. Or it could be that whenever they sought emotional support in the past, it was not provided. So they simply stop seeking it. They stop expecting it from others. It's as if they just turned that switch off, you know? Um, and so for the avoidant adult, emotional closeness and intimacy are often off the table. Like it's just not a thing. It's off the table for them. From the outside, an adult with an avoidant attachment style might look confident, They might look very strong. They look like they have it all together, well collected, well gathered, and all of that. But this does not mean that this person is not suffering inside. I'm just here to tell the truth, okay? They show up very confident and very strong in their day-to-day interactions, but in here, it doesn't mean that the person is not suffering or that they're not making the people around them suffer, because sometimes that is also happening. They are suffering and they're making anybody who tries to have a relationship with them suffer as well, right? So these avoidant adults, like I said, emotional closeness, intimacy off the table. Um, and it's not because they do not realize that they can reap benefits from emotional closeness. They know that emotional closeness has its benefits. They know that. They know that it is sweet to be able to be vulnerable and to bond fully and completely with another human being, but they just don't know how to do it. It is not in their nature to do it. They have to be taught how to do it, quite literally, right? And so, either way, not being able to build a deep, meaningful, and long lasting relationship can be painful for people who have this attachment style. Because, like I said, they see the benefits. Like they can see other people living fulfilled and satisfying lives and having healthy, happy, loving relationships, and they just don't know how to pull it off. They don't know how to get this done. And so it can be painful. People who have this attachment style, they suffer silently a lot, I believe. It can be heartbreaking. Also, for the people who love them and who are watching them suffer. I think it's just all around. It's not a pretty situation all around, right? Um, and this is something I should have mentioned earlier, and I think I did say it earlier, that this is also an important message for parents. So this isn't just for people who are looking for relationships or marriage, or who want, or who are already in relationships or marriage. This is also a critical message for people who are raising children. If you are raising little human beings, this is also a message for you. I hope that you are sharing this live here today. People need to hear this, because having an avoidant attachment style or any type of insecure attachment style is likely to affect your child's attachment style. If you have it, you will probably pass it on. And you don't have to do anything in particular to pass it on. It will very naturally, organically just get passed on based on the way you are interacting with your children. You don't have to do anything. Like, you don't have to be intentional about it. It will just get passed on very naturally as you parent your children. And so, if you want to be intentional about ensuring that your children develop secure attachment, then you have to first pay attention to what your attachment style is. How are you showing up in your relationships? And only then can you begin to make adjustments so that it is reflected then in your parenting of your child, so that your child does not develop the attachment style that you had. Because if you do nothing, they will. You can just do nothing, and by default, they will develop your attachment style. So if you don't want that to happen, then you need to be intentional and do something. I hope I'm coming through clearly. Okay, let's pause for a moment and look at the comment section, because I'm seeing the comment section popping off here. All right. Okay, so I take it not all the elements show up. No, you do not have to have every single last element of the attachment style. But if you are hearing a majority of the characteristics sound like you, then you probably fall into that category. You may not have every last thing, but if it is resonating with you for the most part, then you probably need to look into that. You probably need to look into that. All right. You're waiting to hear the causes. Yes, I am going to talk about what parenting and childhood looked like to bring us to this point. I'm coming to that. Coming to that. I feel like this live is going to go on a little longer than I normally would go on a Sunday, but I think it's worth it today. So stay with me if I go a little bit past the length of the time that I typically am on here for. So let's hit the third insecure attachment style. Remember, there are three insecure attachment styles. Anxious or preoccupied is number one. The second one is the avoidant dismissive. And the third one, which we are about to get into, is the fearful avoidant, also known as the disorganized attachment style. So let's see what the fearful avoidant attachment style looks like. Chris says, not me being a helicopter auntie. The poor people children. I hear you, Chris. Listen, sis, it's rough out here. It's rough out here when one is trying to work on themselves. It is heavy. Listen, it's not easy, but we have to do what we have to do, right? Okay, so let's get into this third insecure attachment style. So if you didn't fall into one of the first two, maybe this might be the one. I don't know. Let's see, because I see people in the comment section here, like they really try to figure this out. Like, is this me? Is that me? So let's get into the third one and see what we have here. So, the fearful avoidant attachment style, also known as the disorganized attachment style, is a combination. Catch this. It's a combination of both the anxious attachment style and the avoidant attachment style. I'm going to pause so that that can sink in because that is heavy. Greetings, Queen Iris sister. Welcome. So I'm going to say that again because that what I just dropped there, you need to get that. The fearful avoidant attachment style, which is also known as the disorganized attachment style, and this is the reason why it's called disorganized. That's how it got this nickname. The official name is the fearful avoidant attachment style. But in a lot of the literature that you read, a lot of the books and the articles, etc., you will also hear it being referred to by the nickname the disorganized attachment style. The reason why it got that name, disorganized, is because it appears to be a combination of the previous two insecure attachment styles. It's a combination, it's a unique combo of both the anxious preoccupied and the avoidant dismissive attachment style, somehow just smashed together to create what we refer to as the fearful avoidant attachment style. This is it's a little wild, right? So, a lot of psychologists believe that this is the most difficult type of insecure attachment. A lot of psychologists and sociologists and psychotherapists believe this. That this one, like if you fall into this category, a lot of them are like, okay, whoo, this a bad boy. This a bad boy right here, right? Um, and so you might see that in some of the literature that you read, where they say that the most difficult type of insecure attachment is the disorganized attachment style. It is often seen in people who have been physically, verbally, or sexually abused in their childhood, right? It is the attachment style that is rooted probably in what we consider to be the more severe types of trauma, if I could put it that way. I mean, trauma is trauma. To be honest, if you've had trauma, you've had trauma. But there are certain types of trauma that we kind of label as being worse than others. All trauma is bad, but I know you get my meaning, right? And so this one tends to be rooted in those types of trauma that we consider to be the really severe types. The physical abuse, the sexually abused child, but of course, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, all of it comes in there. And these types of people tend to develop fearful avoidant attachment. I, D, no, I wasn't going to say disorder. I was not going to say disorder. No, no, I was not. D says bad boy for life, right? So, people with fearful avoidant attachment, they both desperately crave affection and want to avoid it at the same time. Does that even make sense? Do you see why this is referred to as the disorganized attachment style? I'm going to say that again. They desperately crave affection. They want it, just like the anxious, preoccupied people do. But at the same time, they want to avoid it at all costs, just like the avoidant people do. So they want it, but they also don't want it. It's like they want it, but they're afraid of it. You know what I mean? This is why this is referred to as the disorganized attachment style, because the little elements of the anxious attachment style plus the little elements of the avoidant attachment style smashed together to make one big bag of chaos. Yes, that's why it's called disorganized. They crave affection. They really want it. But then get into a relationship with them is a whole other story. They want it, but they're avoiding it. Like, how do you have a relationship with somebody like that? Can you imagine? Can you imagine trying to have a relationship with somebody like that? Right? So they are reluctant to develop a close romantic relationship. Yet at the same time, they have a dire need to feel loved by others. So they live their lives just in a quandary. They want it, but they don't want it. They want that love. They do. They want the love. They want the closeness. They want the intimacy. They want all the things. But they also don't want it, right? So the fearful avoidant attachment is also known as disorganized attachment for this reason. Okay. Um, this type of attachment, as I said a few moments ago, is usually associated with severe trauma. Okay, it's usually associated with very significant psychological risk, um, because you get into a relationship with somebody like this, know that you are going to be dealing with just a just a lot of chaos. You will. In very extreme cases, you might even find these people having issues with hypersexuality, meaning that they are obsessed with sex and may even have sex addictions. There is also an increase, and note, all people with this attachment style are not like this. I'm saying in very severe instances, you might find this hypersexuality, an increased risk of violence in their relationships, because they have difficulty regulating their emotions. These are the types of things that you would see in very severe cases, because, like I said, these are people who typically have a past that is littered with some very serious trauma. Okay. Um, and so they would have difficulties with emotion regulation. Adults with disorganized attachment style, they tend to lack a coherent approach towards their relationships. On one hand, they want to belong, they want to love and be loved. But on the other hand, they are afraid to let anybody in. They have a strong fear that people who are closest to them will hurt them. Okay, so adults with disorganized attachment styles tend to fear intimacy and they avoid proximity, similar to the individuals who have the avoidant attachment that I was just talking about. The main difference for the disorganized adults is that they actually want the relationship, they want it, they're just afraid of it, you know. So these adults, they expect, like they literally expect, and they are waiting for rejection. Like they expect it to happen, like they have programmed their minds that this is inevitable, this is going to happen to me. I get close to somebody and it's inevitable, they are going to break me and destroy me, they're going to break my heart into a billion pieces. I expect it. And so this is the reason why I don't want to get into any relationship. This is the mindset, right? So these adults, they are waiting for the rejection. They're waiting for it. They're waiting for rejection. They're waiting for disappointment. They're just waiting for the hurt to come because they truly believe that it is inevitable. In their perception, it cannot be avoided. You get close to people, that's the result, right? Of course, that is not always the case, but clearly these people have, like cognitive distortions that cause them to see life in a way that is not necessarily a reflection of reality, right? Um, and so they do not reject emotional intimacy. They will get into a relationship with you. They're just afraid of it. So they don't reject emotional intimacy. They're just afraid of it. I hope I'm coming through clearly. So, adults with a disorganized attachment style continue to view the attachment figure who, when I say the attachment figure, the person that they are attaching to in their relationship, they view this attachment figure as unpredictable, basically. And it usually is because whoever their caregiver was in infancy was probably unpredictable, also. They probably did not know what they were going to be getting from one day to the next with this caregiver. And so as a result, they just grew up to believe and to accept that human beings are unpredictable. They don't know what they're going to be getting from one day to the next. And so, they attach at their own risk, basically, right? And so the mindset this mindset that they have going in thinking that it's inevitable that rejection and disappointment and hurt are going to come, this mindset can actually turn into a form of self-sabotage. Literally, it can turn into a form of self-sabotage, because if you go into all of your relationships expecting that it is going to destroy you, well, what do you think is going to happen? How is that going to turn out? Like, how is that going to work out for you? If you're going in with that mindset, like, I'm going into the relationship, but I know this is going to be a train wreck before it has even started. And if you are entering with that mindset, what will be the end result of that? And so the mindset that these people have tends to turn into a form of self-sabotage, quite literally. They're just shooting themselves in the foot with their own mindset, right? And so as a result, disorganized adults tend to find themselves in relationships that just continuously end prematurely because they don't really believe that the relationship can work. So sometimes they themselves are ending the relationship prematurely. It's like they're trying to avoid the pain that they think is inevitable. So before that period comes, let me just get out. So they're ending relationships prematurely. Sometimes they don't even know why they're ending it. Like you're asking, like, why do you want to break up again? And they don't really have like a valid explanation. It's more of, I don't think this is gonna work. I don't know. Just feel like we should go our separate ways, very wishy-washy kind of thing. Because there really is no reason to end the relationship. They're ending it prematurely because they expect that it is going to at some point harm them. Right? It's almost like a type of self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you speak a certain thing over yourself and it just automatically happens. So these disorganized adults, they expect and they predict that they will be rejected by their partners and hurt by their partners, even when there are no signs. Even when there are no signs, even when there is nothing that would even suggest that their partner is going to hurt them, they will start behaving in a way that leads to the fulfillment of that expectation. And the expectation is that the relationship is going to end, right? So, self-fulfilling prophecy, basically. So they confirm their own perception that they can't trust people um, no matter what. It really, at the end of the day, it doesn't depend on the partner ultimately, because no matter what the partner does, they will find a way to sabotage that, right? Disorganized adults also tend to have a very negative view, both of themselves and others. Um, and so they, as a result, have they're at higher risk of developing mental health issues like substance abuse. um, as I mentioned before, they are most likely to have like delinquent behaviors, aggressive behaviors. They might become violent in their relationships. um, they may also be the ones who tend to um, abuse their children. Um, and so, okay. Um, so these are the things that you would see coming from the disorganized um, group or the fearful avoidant group. Okay. Now we're at 7:23. And so I feel like I am going to pause here because um, the next thing that I want to get into, I don't want to start talking about it and cut it halfway. I really wanted to talk about what exactly are the circumstances that lead to each of these four attachment types. Like, I want to break down each one and tell you exactly what type of childhood would you have had that would lead you into this attachment style. And I think that that is going to take maybe another hour for me to unpack. I thought I would have been able to get through to that point today, but it does not look like I will get through to that point. So I'm going to pause here for today. And when I return for part two of this, I will start at that point. So, part two of this attachment series is coming up on the 27th. Note, not next week, Sunday, which is the 20th. Make sure, mark your calendars. Next week, Sunday, which is the 20th, I will not be going live. There will be no live broadcast next Sunday, the 20th of March. I will be back on the 27th. And on the 27th, I am going to continue into part two. When I come back on the 27th, we are going to tackle first thing the circumstances. And when I say the circumstances, I mean I'm talking about what type of childhood would one have had in order to develop this particular attachment style. We're going to dig right into that. I'm going to break it down and we're going to speak about each of the insecure attachment styles and what type of childhood circumstances leads into each one so that you can have an idea of, okay, where exactly did this come from? Why did I cultivate this particular type of attachment? What exactly in my childhood brought me to this point, right? And so I want to get into that with you because I imagine that there are a lot of people who are listening to me right now. I imagine that there are a number of you right now who are probably listening and thinking to yourself, um, I I think I know. I think I know what type of attachment style I have, but I'm not entirely sure. I feel like I need to maybe do like a little test or quiz, and I'm here to tell you that you can. There are a myriad of various quizzes and tests for free that you can access on the internet that help you to determine exactly what your attachment style is. Because if you've listened to all of this and you think you know, but you're not 100% sure and you feel like you just need a little bit more, I encourage you to get online and search for assessments and attachment quizzes and attachment tests. You can find those online all over the place and do one. Many of them are completely free. You can download one and do one and see what it says. See if what you are thinking is actually accurate. Okay, so you can do that and then make sure you come back and catch part two of this attachment series on the 27th. All right. So, with all of that being said, and when I come back with part two, not only are we going to talk about the childhood environments that cause the specific attachment styles, we're also going to talk solutions. Very, very important. So, those are the two things that we will touch on the 27th. Firstly, we're going to talk about childhood environments and childhood circumstances that lead to specific types of attachment. And then we're going to talk solution. Because, like I said at the start, we can't talk about the problem and then not talk about how to fix it. We must address that. We have to talk about how to fix it. Okay, so that is coming up in part two. So do not miss part two of this attachment series coming up on March 27th. All right, and so with that being said, I am going to wrap this live up here. Uh, Talicia, what do you call when you have a little of all attachment? You might be a disorganized attachment style. If you feel like you're having a little bit of all of them, it might be disorganized. Check that out, Queen. Check it out. It might be that you fall into the disorganized attachment category if you feel like you are seeing bits and pieces of everything, right? So, first of all, let me remind you that the Always a Queen, the Metamorphosis platform is a part of the Facebook Stars program. And so you can support this platform by sending me stars. All right. If you have never heard of it, you have no idea what it is simply a program that Facebook has created to give followers an opportunity to support content makers like myself and support these platforms that we manage to pour into the lives of all of our followers. So if you would like to support the Always a Queen platform, you can do that by sending me some stars. You can find a star icon right next to the comment bar. If you click on that, it will give you the opportunity to send me stars. Each star is worth 1 cent. You heard me correct. 1 cent. So you can purchase a package of stars. You can send 50 stars. You can send 100 stars, whatever you would like. And that is your way of supporting the Always a Queen platform. And of course, I am grateful. I thank you for any support that you offer to this platform as I continue to pour into your lives. And as I like to say, this is my little way of changing the world, right? All right. So I leave you all with love and light. And of course, you know how we end these lives. Remember to be a beautiful week. Bye.